Hello, and welcome back to my channel. This is the fourth and final review from my recent Midwest coaster trip, and the one I personally have been looking forward to the most, Kings Island. As always, I will talk about my experiences and opinions on the park's atmosphere and theming, operations, ride collection, variety and things to do, and situational and miscellaneous factors. Then I'll rank the coasters I rode at the park and give my overall thoughts. Let's start off with atmosphere and theming. The moment I stepped out of my car, I was absolutely in love with the atmosphere. I don't even know how to describe it. Everything just felt right. All the employees seemed genuinely happy to be there, showcased before the park even opened with who I assume is either an admissions supervisor or the general park manager, hyping us and the team members at the turnstiles up. I also loved the decorations for the 50th. The look down International Street at the Eiffel Tower gave me the same magical feeling you get when you step into Magic Kingdom and look at the castle down Main Street. They also had a bunch of photo ops and historical posters to celebrate the park, as well as some decorations that went above and beyond, namely the floral calendar that they change every day. I was a little bummed that Tower Gardens was still closed for construction, meaning I couldn't see all the ride placards. I also don't know if I couldn't find the ride graveyard behind the Eiffel Tower, or if it's just not there year-round, so if you've got an answer to that, be sure to tell me down below. The theming wasn't nearly as extravagant as some of the other parks at the top of my list, like Hershey, Universal, Disney, and Busch Gardens Williamsburg. However, that's not to say that there was no theming, it just felt more subtle, which I didn't mind. There was a distinct change in vibe from the Coney Mall to Area 72 to Riverdown to Planet Snoopy, all of which I still felt were unique. The operations at this park had been really hyped up for me, so I was coming in with high expectations and kind of expecting to be a bit let down. But no, the ops were amazing. I came in on Monday, so crowds weren't too heavy, but there was still a decent amount of people there. Things had lines. I waited 30 for Diamondback, 30 for Orion, 45 for Mystic Timbers, 30 for the Beast, 45 for Flight of Fear, 20 to 30 for the Bat. Everything else was 5 minutes at the most. And these trains were rolling. During early entry on Banshee, you could feel the train slow to almost a stop at the top of the lift, because the previous train hadn't hit the brake run yet. Diamondback was sending trains before the previous one even hit the splashdown almost every cycle, and Orion was also dispatching before the previous train hit the brake run. Sure, these ops have been hyped up a lot, but I honestly think they lived up to the hype. These were some, if not the best, ops I've ever seen. This park has plenty to do. They've got 14 coasters of great variety. There's 3 coasters in the kiddie section, with Great Pumpkin Coaster, Woodstock, and Flying Ace. There's 5 of what I would consider family or mild or thrill coasters with the Bat, Adventure Express, Flight of Fear, Backlot, and the Racer, and Vertigo could also probably fit in there. Then you've got not a 1-2 punch, not a 1-2-3 punch, but a 1-2-3-4-5 punch, with the Beast, the world's longest wooden coaster built in-house, Mystic Timbers, an insane GCI, Banshee, arguably the best inverter ever ridden, and one of the best in the world, Diamondback, the hypercoaster, and Orion, the Giga. These 5 coasters are also amazing that no one has come to a consensus as to where they all rank. Going back to variety, there's 6 flat rides or water rides designated as thrill, 26 for family, and 16 for kids. They have 7 listed shows, 5 shops, and 37 dining options. While that's not a lot of shops, they were all pretty big and sold a good selection of park, ride, anniversary, peanut, and generic merchandise, so I was quite pleased with the shopping. Maybe almost too pleased. We're not going to talk about how much I spent on souvenirs there. On the flip side, I was going to say that while there are a lot of dining options, I wish there was a more unique variety, but looking at the website, I might have just been in the wrong places. I had a typical theme park hot dog at Kings Island, and the whole time I was wishing for another meal like the one at Cedar Point's farmhouse, but I do see that they have Coney Barbecue, Island Smokehouse, and Miami Brewhouse, so we're just going to ignore that and call it a situational thing. Which leads us perfectly into the next category. I feel like I hit the situational jackpot here. It was pretty warm, but overcast, so I wasn't dying in the sun. It was Monday, so crowds were fairly light. I did get a headache about halfway through the day, but after taking meds and shopping for a bit, I was back in the game and my head was fine for the rest of the night. I got on everything I wanted to and even got multiple re-rides. The only coaster I didn't ride was in Vertigo, but that was my choice to protect my head. Even at the start of the day, it felt like things might go downhill. Orion and Flight of Fear were delayed, Beast wasn't open, Eiffel Tower was having mechanical issues with the elevator, but all of those ended up opening. It was literally the perfect day. I want to make a separate video diving into my top parks, but let me give you a hint. This is my new number 1. Alright, now on to the coasters. Like I said, everything will be on here except in Vertigo and Great Pumpkin Coaster, obviously, because I don't have a child, I went alone. I would also like to put it out there that I might have some unpopular opinions, but these are solely based on my experiences and preferences, so please don't come at me. Everyone has their own opinion. I struggled with the bottom two, not because either were that bad, but I felt like neither deserved last place. But number 12 is Woodstock Express. This ride is fine, even fun. Definitely not as forceful as Blue Streak, but also definitely not as rough. It's a strong family coaster and a good stepping stone from Great Pumpkin up to the more intense rides. I also love how the ops still called it Beastie. That was a fun little Easter egg. However, I ranked this below my number 11 because I'd already ridden the one at King's Dominion, so I knew what to expect. My number 11 took me by surprise. And that number 11 is Flying Ace Aerial Chase. This may shock some people coming in ahead of Woodstock, as I've heard so much slander on the Vekoma Hang and Bangs, and given their track record with the SLCs, I was expecting an awful ride. However, I found it to be pretty smooth. I don't know if it was my middle seat, how the ride was running that day, or how the restraint fit on me, but it was better than expected. I think this is also a strong family coaster and a good stepping stone for younger ones. This ride was nearly forceless, but I didn't come off it with a headache, so I call that a win. Number 10, The Racer. Also probably another unpopular opinion, but I have my reasons. I had heard that this ride was retracked and that it was running super smooth. I know that that doesn't always mean smooth in general, just rather smooth for a classic Woody. So I still braced myself for the first drop, but then it was almost butter smooth for the entire first half. So I let my guard down, so to speak. Then we hit the turnaround, and it was back to the rough old classic Woody feel. The ride itself wasn't bad, and my expectations going into it weren't super high, but my expectations after the first drop were way too high. However, I do enjoy the racing aspect and appreciate the ride's historical factor. The refreshed paint job also looks great and gives a nice pop of color and theming. Number 9, Adventure Express. This and Racer are kind of similar to Woodstock and Flying Ace for me. I felt like they were both equally fine, but Racer, as you know, kind of let me down. Adventure Express was just fine for a mine train, similar in intensity to Cedar Creek Mine Ride. It's a pretty long ride with a pretty unique layout, especially considering that almost the whole first half of the ride is still the pre-lift. The theming is pretty minimal for most of the ride, but still more than your average mine train. I have a love-hate relationship with the ending. I love the theming in the cave with the statues on either side of you, and the fact that the brake run is a lift hill also makes it incredibly unique. But it also felt anticlimactic. Similar to the other coasters I've mentioned so far, it's a good family coaster. This park definitely has a good collection of those. Number 8, The Bat. Yet another coaster I would count as a strong family coaster. This was similar in intensity to Iron Dragon at Cedar Point, maybe a little more so. I definitely liked the layout and terrain setting of the Bat better, but it was a pretty short ride, hence a fairly low ranking. Number 7, Backlot Stunt Coaster. I enjoyed these rides. While I do consider them family rides in that they're not too crazy, there are still some pretty good forces. The launch is pretty forceful, the tunnel after the mid-course is pitch black, the theming is fun and wonderful, and that drop out of the tunnel under the queue is iconic. Capacity sucks and lines get long, but I got on this pretty early, so it was basically a walk-on, which is a plus. The ride itself is not bad at all. There's just other rides I think are better. Number 6 is Flight of Fear. I personally really enjoyed this ride. The launch is forceful, and this clone was pretty smooth and fast. A lot of people are surprised with how much the coaster picks up in the second half and after the mid-course. For a trim that strong, the train flies through the second half. I also love the theming and the AC. The ride has a pretty low capacity, similar to Backlot, so I feel like the 45 minutes I waited was a good average wait. I personally like this ride better than the one at King's Dominion, but I haven't ridden this or Joker's Jinx at Six Flags America enough to decide which I like better between those two. Starting off my top 5 is the Beast. I'm not sure how I feel about this coaster. As a coaster in its own, it wasn't too thrilling. There is a lot of straight track and the forces aren't super intense, especially airtime. It was also pretty rough in my opinion. I didn't have a huge headache getting off of it, but I definitely don't think I could ride it more than once, maybe twice in a day. I know it was recently retracked, and I can appreciate how smooth it is now compared to what I've heard it had been earlier, though. I can, however, appreciate the historical factor. With its record, it's held for over 40 years and being made entirely in-house, built in just a couple of years. I also really like the setting in the woods and can only imagine the night rides it gives. Without those few factors, though, considering just the coaster itself, I don't think it's anything crazy or top 10 worthy. Number 4 is Diamondback. I'm also not sure how I feel about this coaster. It has a great layout, good airtime, and is pretty long. The splashdown is also very visually pleasing. However, this had more of a rattle in the valleys and turns than I expected. I didn't have a headache after this ride, but I felt one coming on. I heard so many good things about this ride, and I wanted to like it better than Nitro, but I just don't think I can. I got 2 rides on it, one in the back and one in the middle, so it wasn't unbearable, but I don't think I could marathon it, and it's definitely not my top choice at the park. Number 3 is Banshee. This ride was a pleasant surprise. I'd heard so many good things about this and Raptor that they were elite inverts, but I didn't get to ride Raptor, so I wasn't sure what to expect with Banshee. I'm not the biggest fan of the Batman clones. Personally, I don't think they pull many forces, the vest restraints don't go well with the B&M rattle, and that they're too short, in height and duration. Maybe I just test rode the one at Great Adventure too many times, but those rides are a one and done for me. Get the credit and forget it. I was pleasantly surprised with Alpengeist at Busch Gardens last year, as it was taller and way more unique and intense than the Batmans. And Banshee surprised me even more. For the most part, this thing is very smooth. I like the drop right off the lift instead of having a pre-drop. I also love the Banshee screech at the top before the train disengages. It's incredibly forceful, and the inline twist at the end gives such good, slow hang time in contrast to the sheer speed the rest of the ride pulls. I love the spooky theming with the graveyard in the queue and the Easter eggs to pass rides in the park like Son of Beast. And the color scheme is very pleasing to the eye. I got 2 rides on this during early entry, back row, then front, both walk-ons. I don't think I can decide which one I like better, so guess I'll have to get on again. My only complaint is that while it is smooth for an inverting B&M, it's still a B&M with vest restraints, so there's a bit of a rattle in the valleys. Similar to Diamondback, though, I don't think I could ride this more than 3 or 4 times in a row, but it's definitely a top-tier ride. Number 2 is Orion. I know some people don't agree with me on this, but again, I have my reasons. The main reason I put this above Banshee and Diamondback was because, in my opinion, it was running smoother. I also wish this ride was longer, but that was my only real big issue with it. Similar to Millennium, I felt like the first drop lasted forever, and you got some good sustained airtime on that first drop. The other airtime hills had good sustained floater, and that speed hill after the turnaround is something else entirely. I was not expecting such ejector on that hill, so I was very pleasantly surprised with that. This ride does tend to get a long wait, but I rode twice, once in row 2 and once in the very back, and didn't wait more than 30 minutes both times. The theming isn't in your face, but I like the space exploration theme, especially the bunker you enter before the stairs to the station, with all the blueprints and Easter eggs. That was a lot of fun. In terms of headache ability, I could probably short marathon this and be fine. I know a lot of people hate on Orion for one reason or another, but I thought it was an incredibly enjoyable and just plain fun ride. And number 1 is Mystic Timbers. This ride blew me out of the water. Funny enough, my first ride was just alright. It was a posted 30-minute wait, and I kinda had to pee, but I told myself I could wait, because I knew the line was only going to get longer. But then it ended up being a 45, and I found myself focusing less on the ride and more on waiting for it to be over. So I gave it another chance towards the end of the night, and I fell in love. I rode this thing 4 times, once in the back, 2 in the middle, and the last ride of the night in the front. This coaster looks so unassuming, but is an absolute beast. It straight up hauls itself through the layout without a dull moment. The layout itself is also great. This isn't the most or strongest airtime or laterals I've ever experienced, but I think it's the perfect combination of the two. In my opinion, this is also not only the smoothest wooden coaster I've ever ridden, but one of, if not the smoothest, roller coaster I've ridden. You all know by now how much my body tends to dislike wooden coasters, but I rode this thing 3 times in a row, and for me, that is a wonderful sign. I honestly could have gone more, but the park was closed. Let's talk about the shed, though. I personally loved it. I can definitely see how when the ride just opened, how it might have been a disappointment after all that mystery and hype. However, this ride is 5 years old, so I knew going into it that people were dissatisfied with the shed, and with that expectation in mind, I loved it. The vines along the floor and the walls, the creaky tree sounds similar to those on Verbolten, flickering lights. I loved the vibe. I believe I got the snake twice and the bat twice. I know I never got the tree, so guess I'll just have to get on again, oh well. My only real issue with the ride is the block system. There's no mid-course, and there's no block section between the shed and the station. So when 3 trains are running, that means you're waiting for the previous train to hit the brakes to send the first train out of the station. Then you can't send the next one till that first one hits the brakes, so you're on the brake run outside the shed for a full cycle. Then you spend another whole cycle in the shed waiting. Then finally, once that train behind you hits the brake run, the one in front can be sent, and you finally get the video in the shed as you move into the station. I know the park has nothing to do with this, that it's literally the ride design, but I wish that the blocks were rearranged differently, so you weren't just stuck sitting on the brake run for 2 whole cycles. I understand that they make it fun with the warning outside of the shed and you want to build up suspense, but I think it would be just as, if not more effective, if those were shorter. I started to get a little bored waiting, honestly. I felt like I spent more time on the brake run than on the actual ride. Maybe the easiest way to go about this without rearranging the whole brake run would be to only run 2 trains. That way the cycle time would still be around the same, but instead of waiting for the train in front of you to leave the shed, you'd just go right in. I know I talked about that issue for a long time, but it was nowhere near a big enough issue to ruin the ride for me. Honestly, this ride has everything. The elements, the layout and setting, the theming, the smoothness and rewritability on my part. I adored this thing and can't wait to get back to Kings Island to ride it some more. Overall, I thoroughly enjoyed Kings Island. The things they did well, which was the majority of the things, they blew out of the park. The things I think they could use to work on weren't super bad. I've just been to some places that did that thing better, such as the food at Cedar Point. So many fixed as well as situational things came together to make this one of, if not the best days I've ever had at a park. And my one day here shot this park up to my #1 spot. I want to get back soon to do some things I missed, as well as get more rides on some of my favorite coasters. And with that, thank you all so much for joining me on this journey covering my Midwest trip. I hope you enjoyed. I hope sometime soon to be able to make a more general list of my favorite coasters, parks, and my bucket list items. I'm also looking forward to my next trip, which you'll find out about soon. I've got some things in store, so be sure to be on the lookout for those when they come out. Until then, thank you for watching, have a nice day, and I'll see you next time.